Yeah, I worked for Bob Novak, and he was always on the opinion page and very clear about his views, but he was also a reporter. I try to do the same thing, so I was going to tell you a couple of sort of the stories I've come across, and the story I wanted to start with was, it was Earth Day 2002, and Al Gore was giving a big speech about saving the planet, and when he was attacking George Bush, he attacked Bush for, quote, advancing Enron's agenda. And the entertaining thing about that is that Al Gore knew very well what Enron's agenda was on the environment, because Gore and Clinton had met with Enron CEO Ken Lay in the West Wing to talk about how Enron wanted the U.S. to ratify the Kyoto Protocol on climate change, the first big cap-and-trade scheme that got brought up in the United States. You had Ken Lay writing op-eds in the Houston Chronicle about why we need to ratify Kyoto and start putting a price on carbon. You had, I had a former lawyer for Enron had done a FOIA search for Enron's emails with the Bush and Clinton administration, and he showed them to me, and there was a line from one executive to another in an email about Kyoto ratification. This will be good for Enron stock, exclamation point, exclamation point. They called getting this cap and trade scheme in one of the two most important things that they could do in their lobbying efforts. Part of it was just that they're a natural gas company, and natural gas is lower in CO2 than coal and oil are. Part of it was that they wanted to do a trading floor in natural gas credits, and they saw ways to make huge profit off of that. And so they were the big evil business, supposedly the example of capitalism run amok when they went down, but they were in electricity regulation. They weren't lobbying for deregulation. They weren't free market evangelists. They were crony capitalists. They were people who would game the market, game the government in order to profit in ways that they couldn't profit in the free market. And they have, there's an heir to Enron right now in a lot of this, and that's General Electric. General Electric owns a lot of the wind assets of Enron. General Electric has started a company called Greenhouse Gas Services that looks to generate and trade in greenhouse gases. And you saw General Electric CEO just got awarded with being one of President Obama's closest advisors. But it's not just in the energy industry. In tobacco, I remember Barack Obama saying in the Rose Garden when he signed the tobacco regulation bill, we finally stood up to big tobacco. At that very moment, Philip Morris, the biggest tobacco company in America, was putting out the press release saying, we applaud the president for finally passing this bill. Philip Morris had been lobbying for this federal regulation on tobacco for 10 years, in part because just a simple economics. When you are 50% of the U.S. cigarette market, regulation will always fall heavier on your smaller competitors. If advertising is heavily restricted, then, well, you're going to keep your market share. The smaller guys can't get into it. We saw it on Obamacare. You guys saw the largest single industry group in the United States as far as lobbying spending is the Pharmaceutical Researchers and Manufacturers of America, the drug lobby. All in all, the drug industry spent far more than any other industry on lobbying so far under President Obama. They supported the health care bill. Billy Tozan, he was the head of the pharma lobby. He had a seat at the table in the White House in writing the health care bill. They got handouts. They got lengthy exclusivity on their high-tech drugs. They got subsidies. They benefit from some of the mandates. So again and again, the biggest businesses across industries are lobbying for and profiting from bigger government. You saw it with toy regulation too. Mattel backed that bill knowing it would hurt their smaller competitors. And so one of the things I say about lobbying, though, is sometimes you don't hate the player, hate the game, because you saw what happened to Microsoft. You remember in 1998, Bill Gates got called before Congress, and they had these, televised beatings of Bill Gates, basically. And after that, he said to one reporter, he said, look, I didn't used to come to Washington very often, but now I'm going to come a lot more. Sure enough, he ramped up his lobbying. And at first, maybe the lobbying was defensive, and this is a pattern. Businesses feel beat up by government. They start going in there, oh, don't regulate us here, don't hike our taxes, don't punish us there. But then the lobbyists sit down with them after a couple of years and say, you know, there's a lot of benefit you could get if we, you know, slap this mandate on these other businesses, or if we regulate your competitors. And there's no reason you can't be sticking your hands in the federal trough, especially today in the day of bailouts and stimulus. Guys who used to see themselves as, well, I'm an entrepreneur, I'm out there trying to communicate, trying to get to consumers what they want, get it in a better way. They're now saying, how can I line up to get what the government is handing out to me? There's a danger for businesses, though, and we saw it with the HMOs. They proposed the individual mandate. They got the individual mandate together with these new regulations on medical loss ratios that are slowly going to be ratcheted up, where basically they're going to say the profits you're allowed to take, the amount you're allowed to pay your executives, your employees at your health insurance companies, we're going to tighten the screws again and again. And eventually, I think those will become we're going to have a single payer system, because that's the path that we're on, unless you guys can completely undo all of this somehow. We saw it happen with the student loans already, right? Student lenders getting subsidized and subsidized, new subs. Oh, you know what? If there's a default, we'll pay for it. While they're in school, we'll pay the interest. Subsidy this, we'll fix the rate and make up the difference. And then there's Congressman Tim Bishop, Democrat from Long Island, said, wait a second, so taxpayers are bearing the risk, taxpayers are subsidizing this, why does some middleman get to take a profit? And that's exactly what these businesses become, who are sticking their hands out for regulations and lobbying for more special favors, is they just become profit-taking middlemen. And so it's almost sensible for the Democrats to say, I don't see why these student lenders, who, when taxpayers are bearing the risk, why should they get to keep the profits? So there is that death spiral risk. But on the other hand, the sad fact is that a lot of these businesses, for the short term particularly, do profit more from lobbying for handouts and protective regulation than they do just by competing in the free market. And the people protesting outside, they say, you know, everybody here, it's just for greed. New Yorker called it a pro-corporate agenda. I know what a pro-corporate agenda looks like. I've followed GE's lobbying. I've followed the lobbying for the bailouts. And sometimes a pro-corporate agenda, whatever that means, you know, less regulation and lower taxes, but a lot of times it means handouts and bailouts and regulations to kill your competitors. And so I see the protesters, the added attention on what you guys are all doing here as an opportunity for people to say, what are you doing here? How much do you care, and in which ways, about liberty? Is it really just to increase your profits? Because my answer is, well, for the short term, there's much better ways to increase your profits than coming here. Go to K Street and hire a couple lobbyists. Hire Tony Podesta. He'll help you probably more than these ideas will if what you care about is short-term profits. If you care about building a business, if you think that enterprise is a worthwhile endeavor, or if you care about liberty because for moral reasons, because you know that it's wrong to take somebody else's property without their consent, that you want to profit, but you want to profit from a consensual exchange with customers. If that's why you care about liberty, that's different from simply caring about profits. That's wanting to profit in a moral way and refusing to profit through unjust means. And you might care about it for the sort of empirical reasons Rich Fink talks about. Poor countries, well, freer countries, even the poor people there are lifted up. It's the best welfare program you can have is economic freedom. And there are all sorts of reasons to care about liberty, and I think a lot of businessmen who do talk about capitalism, when the rubber meets the road and they have a choice between capitalism and profiting through cronyism and through what I call regulatory robbery, a lot of people choose the other route. And so it makes a difficult decision sometimes for businessmen. Which one do you care more about? Are you willing to forego profits that are perfectly legal just because you think it's the wrong way to do it? I think those are the questions, because the media will always think that the liberals have the moral high ground, and I don't believe that at all. I think that people pursuing enterprise and profit through free markets have the moral high ground. But so many people who say they're going that route, really, they'll take the profit even if it takes government to get that way. I'm willing to, happy to take a couple questions until we get cut off.